My name's Jay Tambardino with the Minnesota Bankers Association, and welcome to a Minnesota Banking Minute. Today I have a special guest, Ed McMurray with CoNetrix Security, and we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about information security and what goes into a penetration test versus a vulnerability scan. So, Ed, what is the main difference between a vulnerability scan and a penetration test?
Yeah, so this is a question that we get a lot, and thanks, Jay, for having me on. So a vulnerability scan, it's easy for anybody out there to say, hey, we'll do a penetration test, and all they really do is run a vulnerability scanning tool and give you the results and say, there's your penetration test. And yeah, that does identify vulnerabilities, but what distinguishes a vulnerability scan from a penetration test is the human involvement. You having the penetration testers who have the experience and the knowledge and the certifications to look at those vulnerabilities and tell you, yeah, that's a vulnerability, but is it a high-risk vulnerability? Is it a low-risk vulnerability? Can it actually be exploited in a reasonable manner? So that having that human expertise to interpret the results of a vulnerability scan and other tools is what really makes the difference. And that's where a lot of these terms like red team, blue team, purple team come in. That's the people, right? The teams. And so the red team, and just to explain the terms, because they can be very confusing, red team would be the penetration testers. That's those experienced people that are attacking your network from the outside. The blue team is your staff or your vendors that are doing your information security for you on the inside. They're the defenders of your network. And then purple team is the key term, because that's what really distinguishes a really good penetration test, is when those two teams get together and the penetration testers provide their results, and here's what we did, and here's how we were able to exploit these vulnerabilities. And then the blue team can say, oh, okay, I see how you did that. Or, yeah, but we were able to stop you here, or we could put this control in place and that would stop you. And it's that red team, blue team, purple team combination that can really make a difference in your security controls.
Perfect. So what value should a financial institution be looking to get out of a pen test?
Yeah, so the value that you need to get out of a penetration test is you need to know what attackers are going to do to you from the outside. And you need to know that in a way that you can explain to people who are not technically savvy. You need to be able to explain it to an auditor or an examiner, or more importantly, your management team and your board of directors. And so having a penetration test firm that can present the results into a report that is easy to understand, that can be translated into plain English, and that they can explain to you in a way that makes sense to your shareholders, that's where the real value from a penetration test comes from.
So we've all heard horror stories on pen tests that go wrong and cause system downtime or broken connections and being forced and locked out. So what do financial institutions look for in selecting this process to ensure that it doesn't happen to them?
Yeah, so that's a valid concern, because there's been so many horror stories. One recently was the penetration testers got arrested because of things that they were doing. The best thing you can do to protect yourself from any sort of interference that your penetration testing might cause is during the vendor selection, go through the contract, and if they don't define the rules of engagement for what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, then you need to ask them to define that, because it's easy to say, we're going to test your security controls, but that leaves a lot of leeway for all sorts of crazy testing that might cause damage, or they might be testing methods that you're not comfortable with. And so, for example, do you want somebody physically trying to break into your building, or are you just interested in the electronics side of things? So that's scoping, and then the rules of engagement. Are they going to attempt to break things? Are they going to attempt to only exploit vulnerabilities that allows them to get into the system without bringing the system down? Are they going to make changes to your systems that you might have to restore from backup to undo those changes in a safe way? Those types of rules of engagement need to be defined in the contract and in the project scope to ensure that that they're only going to be doing what you're comfortable with them doing.
Perfect. So what certifications do you want to see in your whoever you engage with for these pen tests?
So certifications are a little bit difficult on the penetration testing side of things. On IT audit, there's very well-defined, very well-known certifications. And on pen testing, it's a little bit more the Wild West. There's lots of different possibilities. But the top ones that you should look for would be the Certified Ethical Hacker. Anything from offensive security is a high-quality certification. One of them is the Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP. That's a good one to look for. And then any of the SANS certifications are also high quality. SANS kind of engineers themselves to look like an academic institution. And so a lot of their material is that quality of material. So those would be the top ones that I would look for. And then of course you're going to run across many others, and there's too many to list. But then you would have to do some research or go back and say, well, do you have anybody that has these certifications? Those are the ones I'm interested in.
Perfect. Now pen test reports are notoriously full of technical jargon, very specifics on what threats, port addresses. This is exactly what is. Let me rephrase this. The port listing will be listed as to what it was initially assigned to, but they make reports and really nobody knows what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you're going to get usable results?
Right. So the short answer is ask for a sample. Say, give me a sample of your penetration test report. Let me read through it. Let me see if I understand it. And if I don't, can you go over it with me? Can you explain it to me? Because those are the two things that you're going to get in the end. You're going to get the report, and you're going to get the interaction with the firm, and one or both of those needs to be at a level where you walk away saying, okay, I understand, I understand the threat, I understand why it's a risk, and I understand what I can do about it. If you don't walk away from that interaction and reading the report with that information, then you really haven't gotten anything that you're going to be able to take action on. And so, yeah, those are the important things.
So what are some comments that you've heard from examiners on pen test, what a pen test should or should not include, and what constitutes a penetration test?
So examiners are, they're putting more reliance on penetration testing in their exams, and they're to go back to the difference between a vulnerability scan and a penetration test. That's one of the first things they look for. Is they will take a copy of whatever penetration test report the institution gives them, and they'll look at it and say, okay, does this look like it was done by a firm that knows what they're doing, they have expertise in penetration testing, and they've got people involved in doing the testing. If it looks like all that was run as a tool, and then the results of that tool were given to the institution, and it was called a penetration test, examiners are getting really good at identifying those, and they're not considering those to be sufficient for penetration testing. And then to get into maybe a topic for another time, they are starting to broaden their scope. They're looking not only for external penetration testing, which is what we've been talking about here today, but they're starting to look for internal penetration testing as well. So what happens if somebody penetrates that hard outer shell that you built on your perimeter and gets to the soft inside? What kind of damage could they do at that point? So yeah, examiners are brushing up on their penetration testing, and they're definitely looking for that level of quality in the penetration testing.
Perfect. Well, Ed, thank you. I think you touched on a topic that we're going to probably try to explore in the future a little bit on the internal vulnerability or internal penetration testing. Like that topic, I think we've given a lot of good information to our Minnesota banks or all of our listeners that are out there today. And I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Jay. I've really appreciated being here. It's fun.
Oh.